911. What's your emergency? My husband. Oh God, my husband. He's been shot. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Where are you located? Traer. We're in Traer, Iowa. Please hurry.
It was 4:40 in the morning on June 18th, 2021, when this desperate call shattered the pre-dawn silence in the small town of Traer, Iowa. Population just over 1,600 people. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where doors are left unlocked, and where the most exciting thing that happens is usually the Friday night football game. But what police officers discovered when they arrived at the Cooper residence would forever change this quiet farming community. What they found wasn't just a tragic shooting. It was the culmination of a web of lies, betrayal, and murder that had been spinning for months in the shadows of suburban Iowa. This is the story of Karina Cooper, a woman who would go from grieving widow to convicted killer, and the investigation that revealed the shocking truth behind one of Iowa's most chilling domestic crimes. To understand the events of that fateful June morning, we need to travel back in time and get to know the people at the center of this tragedy. Traer, Iowa sits nestled in Tama County, surrounded by endless cornfields and the kind of Midwestern values that built America. It's a place where your neighbor is your friend, your mailman knows your dog's name, and secrets don't stay buried for long. Ryan Cooper was 50 years old, a man who had spent his life working with his hands and building a future for his family. Those who knew him described him as hardworking, reliable, and devoted to his wife of many years. He was the kind of man who fixed things when they broke, who showed up when you needed help, and who believed that marriage was for better or for worse. His wife, Karina Cooper, was 45 at the time of the incident. To the outside world, she appeared to be the devoted wife, standing by her husband's side through life's ups and downs. Neighbors would see them together at community events, at the local grocery store, living what seemed to be an ordinary middle American life. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect small-town marriage, cracks had begun to form. Like a fault line building pressure deep underground, the foundation of the Cooper marriage was shifting in ways that Ryan couldn't see, but that would ultimately lead to catastrophe. The first sign of trouble came in the form of another man, Houston Danker. While details about their initial meeting remain unclear, what investigators would later discover was that Karina had begun an extramarital affair that would consume her thoughts, her actions, and ultimately, her judgment. Affairs happen in small towns just like they do in big cities. Usually they result in divorce, broken families, and community gossip. But this affair was different. This affair was about to turn deadly. In the months leading up to June 2021, those closest to the couple began to notice subtle changes. Friends would later tell investigators that Karina seemed distracted, secretive, spending more time on her phone and less time engaged with her husband. But Ryan, trusting and unsuspecting, continued his daily routine, unaware that his wife was planning something that would ensure he would never see another sunrise. The town of Traer had no idea that beneath its peaceful exterior, a conspiracy was brewing. A conspiracy that involved not just an unfaithful wife, but her lover, detailed planning, and a cold-blooded determination to eliminate the one person standing between Karina Cooper and what she believed was her new life. As spring turned to early summer in 2021, the stage was set for a tragedy that would shock this quiet Iowa community to its core. The players were in position. The plan was in motion, and Ryan Cooper was living on borrowed time, completely unaware that the woman sleeping beside him each night was plotting his murder. The clock on the nightstand read 4:37 a.m. when Karina Cooper made the call that would change everything. But this wasn't the first call she made that night. It was just the one that mattered most to her plan. Picture this scene: a modest home on a quiet street in Traer, Iowa. The kind of street where porch lights cast long shadows across well-maintained lawns, where the only sounds at 4 a.m. should be the distant hum of air conditioners and the occasional car passing through town. But inside the Cooper residence, something horrific had just occurred. When the first police officers arrived at 4:40 a.m., responding to Karina's frantic 911 call, they expected to find a burglary gone wrong, perhaps a home invasion, or maybe even a suicide. What they found instead would haunt them for years to come. Officer Johnson was the first through the door. Years of police work had prepared him for many things, but nothing could have prepared him for the scene that greeted him in the Cooper living room. There, slumped in a brown leather recliner, the kind of chair where a man might watch Sunday football or read the morning paper, was Ryan Cooper. But Ryan would never watch another game or read another headline. 2 gunshot wounds to his face had ended his life in the most brutal way imaginable. But it wasn't just the sight of Ryan's body that disturbed the responding officers. It was Karina. When police entered the living room, they found Karina Cooper positioned on top of her husband's lifeless body. She was screaming. Not the shocked, horrified screams of a woman who had just discovered her husband's murder, but something different, something that made the hair on the back of Officer Johnson's neck stand up. She wasn't performing CPR. She wasn't checking for a pulse. She was there, draped over her dead husband, screaming in what investigators would later describe as one of the most disturbing crime scenes they had ever encountered. The physical evidence told a horrifying story. Dr. Kelly Cruz, the Associate State Medical Examiner, determined that Ryan had been killed by 2 gunshot wounds to the head, both fired at close range, intimate range. This wasn't random violence. This was personal. This was an execution. Both wounds were independently fatal, but the killer wanted to make certain. The positioning of the body, the lack of defensive wounds, the absence of any struggle, all pointed to one chilling conclusion. Ryan Cooper had been killed by someone he trusted. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of robbery. The house was neat and undisturbed, except for the horrific scene in the living room. Someone had walked up to Ryan as he sat in his favorite chair and ended his life with cold-blooded precision. As the sun rose over Traer that June morning, investigators knew they weren't dealing with random violence. They were dealing with calculated murder, committed by someone who had looked Ryan Cooper in the eye and decided he needed to die. The question wasn't who had the opportunity. The question was who had the motive, and the answer lay in the most intimate betrayal imaginable: a wife who had decided that murder was preferable to divorce. Detective Sarah Martinez knew within the first hour that this case was different. Standing in that living room watching Karina's behavior, every instinct told her something wasn't right. The investigation began with simple questions, but Karina Cooper's responses raised red flags from the start.
Mrs. Cooper, what happened last night? I was asleep. I heard gunshots and found him like that. How many gunshots? 2, I think. Maybe 3, I don't remember.
But the story didn't add up. Both shots were fired at close range, too close to make enough noise to wake someone sleeping 30 feet away. And with each interview, Karina's story shifted. First, she was asleep upstairs, then in the bathroom, getting water in the kitchen. The real breakthrough came when detectives dug into Karina's personal life. What they discovered transformed this from a domestic homicide into a months-long conspiracy. Karina's phone records revealed hundreds of messages between her and Huston Danker. Not just an affair, but detailed murder plans. Text from Karina, 3 weeks before. He'll never agree to divorce, till death do us part. Text from Huston, 2 weeks before. Then maybe death is the only way. The lovers discussed methods, timing, and life insurance money as casually as planning a vacation. The most chilling messages came hours before and after the murder. 11:47 p.m., June 17th. It's time. 5:23 a.m., June 18th. It's done. When confronted with this evidence, Karina's facade crumbled. Detective Martinez, we've recovered your text messages. We know about everything. Karina Cooper, I want a lawyer. 3 weeks after Ryan's murder, the investigation shifted to building an airtight case. Forensic evidence supported the digital trail, gunshot residue, ballistics, and crime scene reconstruction. All pointed to murder by someone Ryan trusted. When Karina was arrested in February 2024, nearly 3 years later, Trayer was stunned. The grieving widow was revealed as the architect of her husband's death. Even facing overwhelming evidence, she maintained her innocence, having spent 3 years perfecting her story. July 11th, 2025. Nearly 4 years after Ryan Cooper's murder, 12 citizens of Lynn County filed into a courtroom to render judgment on his widow. The trial had been moved due to extensive media coverage in the tight-knit community. For 3 weeks, the prosecution methodically built its case. District Attorney Thompson's opening was devastating. This case is about the ultimate betrayal. The defendant looked the man who loved her in the eye, and she killed him in cold blood. The prosecution's star witness was the digital evidence itself. Text messages created an impossible-to-deny timeline of conspiracy. Prosecutor Thompson. March 15th, 2021. Text from Karina. I dream about a life where he's not in the picture. Prosecutor Thompson. April 2nd. Huston's response. Maybe we need to make that dream a reality. The defense faced an uphill battle. How do you explain away hundreds of incriminating messages and gunshot residue on your client's hands? But the prosecution's ace was Huston Danker himself. In exchange for a plea deal, he testified against his former lover. Prosecutor Thompson. Did the defendant discuss killing her husband, Huston Danker? Yes, many times. She said divorce wasn't an option. The only way she could be free was if Ryan died. Prosecutor Thompson. Did you agree to help her, Huston Danker? Yes, God help me, I did. Janka described their cold planning sessions. According to his testimony, Karina wasn't emotional about killing her husband. She was like she was planning a grocery shopping trip. When Karina testified in her own defense, she claimed the messages were just fantasies from an unhappy marriage, but under cross-examination, her explanations crumbled when confronted with life insurance policy increases and financial motives. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Court clerk, how do you find? Jury foreman, guilty. On September 5th, 2025, Karina received life without parole. Judge Williams addressed her directly. This was a calculated, premeditated act of cold-blooded murder. You shall be imprisoned for the rest of your natural life. The impact extended beyond the courtroom. Trayer residents who had supported the grieving widow felt betrayed and manipulated. The case highlighted how digital evidence has revolutionized criminal investigations. Huston Danker received 25 years and will be eligible for parole in 2040. Ryan's family established a scholarship fund in his memory. The murder house was sold and renovated, but in small-town Trayer, Everyone still remembers what happened that June morning. Ryan Cooper went to bed on June 17, 2021, believing he was safe, protected by his wife's love. He never imagined death would come from the person lying next to him. The Karina Cooper case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind familiar faces and marriage vows. Sometimes the person most capable of destroying us is the person we least suspect. But justice prevailed. After 4 years, Ryan Cooper's murder would not go unpunished. The digital evidence Karina thought was private became the voice of the voiceless. Tonight, remember Ryan Cooper, a husband, a community member, a man who deserved better than the ultimate betrayal. Karina Cooper chose murder over divorce. Now, she'll spend her life locked away from the freedom she thought killing would provide. Evil can hide in plain sight, but justice will eventually find its way home.
If you found this case chilling, like, share, and subscribe. There's more waiting just beneath the surface.